All right. Um, all right. Yeah, kính chào thầy. Hello thầy and everyone today. Thank you thầy and everyone for joining us today. It is the Buddhism journey for beginners, originally with intent for this um uh, for this journey is for us to learn the basic Buddhism. Mostly for us, it's for the young adult and college students. But anyone who are beginners with the Buddhism can able to join us as well. Um, for the Zoom ethic, we just please mute your microphone and be respectful to our Dharma master and everyone. Turn on your video so we can see you because this is an online class. And also another thing is we edit your profile name and FCT and state, and since this is online as well. With that, I think today was we were honored to have to get the invitation and get accepted by our venerable Thich but thầy has some last minute change, and that is why thầy thầy Chân Tạng talk will give us the teaching today in place of thầy Thich Thầy Thich Chân Tạng is thầy Thich student. So but this is a brief summary, and I also sent it out in our email communication about thầy Thich But since thầy Chân Tạng in the place of the teaching, I think I'm going to skip that for today. So with this, I would like to have us all, as a Buddhist practice, before we start at any teaching, we would like to have the short, we call the opening prayers and take refuge. If you're comfortable to do that, just please put your palm together and do it with us. But it's okay if you're not comfortable and not ready for taking the three refuge. But with that, I would like to start the opening prayer. So I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Drawing in the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Drawing in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Drawing in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that support me, keep my practice free of obstruction. Take refuge in the Buddha in myself. I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realize the mind of love. Take refuge in the Dharma in myself. I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and work together on the path of liberation. Taking refuge in the Sangha in myself, I aspire to help all people build four-form communities to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Our dear teacher, in accordance with the interest and the faculty of the sentient beings, please turn the wheel of Dharma of the small, great, and common vehicles. Cảm ơn Phật thưa thầy. At this time, thầy, please taking over the teaching, please. Are you on mute, thầy?
Hello, everyone. I'm very, very honored and very happy to be here. May I ask, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. So, dear brothers and sisters, before I would like to begin, I would just like to say some words of greeting, some well wishes to all of you. I hope that you're doing well today, and I also hope that today we will have a wonderful session of sharing and learning together. And I also wanted to send my teacher's regards to all of you. Unfortunately, because there was some difficulties with his schedule at the last minute, so my teacher sent me to share the Dharma with you instead. And I say share the Dharma because I myself am not a Dharma master, but I'm someone who is practicing to try to master the Dharma. And I think all of us are on the same page, right? We're all still practitioners who are embarking on the path, embarking on the journey, and we walk together as a community. And my teacher was not able to make it today, but I'm honored to be here and to humbly share from my own practice with you. My name is Brother Andy. My Dharma name is Tang, and Tang means storage of truth. You can just call me Brother Andy, and I've been a monastic for most of my life. So I was brought to the temple um, by my grandmother when I was very young, and she was babysitting me. So every time she wanted to go to the temple, she had to bring me with her, and that was the one of the very first reasons why um, something sparked in me that later on caused me to ask my parents, ask my grandparents, and the permission from my family to become a monk. And I've been a monk for most of my life. So I'm very happy to share with you from my own capacity, and hopefully we can all enjoy the teachings of the Buddha together. And as we just finished inviting the teacher to turn the Dharma wheel, I believe that I believe that the Buddha turned the wheel of the Dharma a long, long time ago, and he continues to turn the wheel of the Dharma in this very moment. As long as we practice his teachings, as long as we see benefit in the Buddhist teachings and continue to apply his teachings to our daily lives, the Buddha will always be turning the Dharma wheel. So I'm not the one to turn the Dharma wheel, but you are also our friends, our brothers and sisters here are individuals who can partake in turning the Dharma wheel in our daily lives. So today, I would like to share with you a little bit about the topic that was proposed. Um, just to get it right, let me pull up the document. The timeless teachings on suffering and happiness. And when we hear of the term suffering in the Buddhist teachings, uh, sometimes it can be very easily confused, or some people might have a sense that when we speak of suffering, when we speak of suffering, or we hear that Buddhism teaches the Four Noble Truths or the way to transform suffering, it might put a bit of negative light on the Buddhist teachings. And seeing suffering is not pessimistic, but seeing suffering in life means to accept that suffering is a part of life. And accepting that suffering is a part of life is at the same time accepting something very wonderful. That is, if suffering is a part of life, happiness is also a part of life. Just like when you have a pencil, if you accept that there is a left side to the pencil, there must be a right side to the pencil. If you accept that there is light, then there must be darkness as well. So when we speak of suffering, we also speak of happiness. And in the Buddhist teachings, there is the teaching, the very fundamental teaching of the Buddha, which is the Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha speaks about, in the Four Noble Truths, about suffering and the path to the end of suffering, the extinction or cessation of suffering, the transformation of suffering. And the word suffering here comes from the word dukkha. And dukkha just means, in the context of the Buddha, unsatisfactoriness, something that is unsatisfactory. It doesn't mean always pain or suffering in the sense that we are used to hearing the word suffering being referred to as or being used as. But suffering in the context of the Buddha is the nature of all things is unsatisfactory, which is the first noble truth. And I would like to give an example of the nature of unsatisfactoriness, or the first noble truth, which is dukkha. We can we can see that I'm sure that all of us here have bought something before, or maybe more in specific, if you bought something from Amazon before, and you looked online to find something that you really needed, or maybe you're just looking online to find something nice that you possibly could want or possibly could buy. And in some way, when we go on Amazon and we look at all of these products, and when we purchase those products, there is a kind of excitement. There's a kind of um, longing and feeling of being eager to wait for that product to arrive. But when we actually get that product and it comes to our door and we open it, sometimes it just takes one glance at it for us to feel all of that happiness, all of that excitement go away. And that is an example of our fleeting happiness, or this satisfaction that we were looking for is is not satisfying our deeper desire, our true sense of wanting to search for something that leads us to happiness for the long term. And sometimes we use whatever product it is for a while, and then we find it sitting on our shelf, or we find it in our drawer, and we never touch it for a really, really long time again. And uh, that is an example of this happiness that is relative, and it only gives us a sense of fleeting satisfactoriness. And another thing that we can see is that the nature of all things is impermanent. That means nothing is fixed as it is. And the reason why, one of the reasons why we suffer is because we run after things that always are in their nature changing. There's a saying that you can never bathe in the same river twice. So if you go back to that same riverbank and you jump in the river and you bathe, and for a few days, each day will be different. The water in the river will be different. So if we are attached to something that is fleeting, something that is not uh, cohesive, then we will be running after things that always change. When we go to find whatever it is that we think is uh, is solid, that we are aiming for, that we're looking for, we might not find whatever it is uh, that we were looking for there again. So again, suffering here doesn't mean that uh, only that life is suffering, and it's not meant to shed a lot of sadness and pessimistic, or it's not intended to be pessimistic, but suffering here is accepting the noble truth that in life there is unsatisfactoriness. Um, and you might ask, what is so noble about suffering? Well, the noble truth says that suffering is just as noble as the path, just exactly as if the light is just as valuable as the dark. The right side is just as valuable as having the left side. So the suffering itself is very, very valuable because it is just as valuable as the path, and it helps to support the path to the end of suffering. The Four Noble Truths are suffering, finding the causes of suffering, the end of suffering, and the path to the end of suffering. So when we see that there is suffering, that's kind of like seeing that there is compost. But with compost, we have the hope that we can use that compost to uh, to grow our flowers. So when the Buddha teaches that life in its nature is unsatisfactory, that's also a kind of hope for us. Teaches that life in its nature is suffering is a kind of hope for us because we believe that if there is suffering, then there is a way out of suffering. Just as if there's light, there is also dark. If there's right, there's also left. And in the Buddhist teachings, if we walk the Noble Eightfold Path, which is the fourth noble truth, if we walk the Noble Eightfold Path, which I will share with you later, that leads to the end of our suffering or the transformation of our suffering. In other words, the Noble Eightfold Path is kind of like the the way to live. Buddhism itself, for me, even as a monk who has practiced for over 20 years, is a way of life. Having right view as the first path of the Eightfold Path, right view. The second is right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, and right mindfulness, as well as right concentration. So the Eightfold Path in itself, the way that brings us and leads us to the end of our suffering is hope. It shows us that it is possible to live in such a way that we can transform the suffering that exists in our daily lives. If suffering is the first noble truth, then the second noble truth, which is the cause of suffering, is the ignoble truth, means the truth that is not noble. We can also look at the Four Noble Truths in a way of well-being in our body and mind, and ill-being in our body and mind. So hopefully I don't confuse you, but suffering or the causes of suffering is the part of the noble truths that represent ill-being, which means you're not feeling so well, you're not happy in your body and in your mind. But the end of suffering and the path to the end of suffering in the Four Noble Truths is considered the path of well-being, which is the noble path. When we walk these two different paths, they lead us to different destinations. One is it will ultimately lead us to ill-being, the ignoble truth, which are the causes of our suffering, and the other is the path, the noble path, which is the path that will lead us to the end of our suffering, which is well-being, being able to be well, and the absence of ill-being is the path. In other words, and another way to put it is the end of ill-being is well-being. The end of all of our causes that cause us to suffer is when well-being manifests. And if you see the Four Noble Truths in this way, it's easy to understand the Four Noble Truths, especially when we see it as the well-being and the ill-being of our body and mind. If we may have lived in a way in the past that has led us to ill-being. These are the causes of our suffering. For example, sometimes for me myself, I stay up late to do to do some work or to do some studying. And then the next morning in the monastery, we had to wake up super early in the morning, sometimes at 5. Sometimes if we try to nap in a little bit more, we might get till 5:30, but we have to be there at 6 for the morning chanting. And sometimes in the morning, we have to do 100 prostrations, the 100 prostrations, a kind of practice that we do, a practice of gratitude and a practice of self-reflection as well, to see our own mistakes and to try to improve. Um, and doing 100 prostrations when you didn't have enough sleep the previous night is very, very difficult because during that moment, you feel like you have no energy left in your body. And there have been times where I have stood there and as I bowed and my head touched the cushion, the mat that I was bowing on, I could almost feel myself snoring as soon as my head hit the cushion. So if I'm suffering a lot in that moment and using all my energy and strength to stand up, uh, and I'm feeling very tired during that moment, um, in order to make it not happen again the next time, then I have to discover what was the path that led me to this ill being, to this being tired in the morning, and investigating within my suffering, looking deeply into my suffering, seeing what had happened that morning teaches me that, okay, maybe you should go to sleep early and wake up early and do your work in the morning. Or perhaps you could go to sleep earlier, but try to find some time in the day where you can get your work done so then you don't have to stay up late to do it. Because at night your body needs to rest. And that is being able to see the path, the way out of the suffering by looking deeply into our suffering. So Buddhism doesn't teach us the way to run away from our suffering, but teaches us to go directly into our suffering, to look deeply into our suffering with mindfulness. And from looking at uh, the the very subject of our the very object of our suffering, or the suffering itself, we find the path. So it's quite easy to understand when we refer to when we speak about the Four Noble Truths, and these two paths, the path to well-being and the path to um, ill-being. Uh, it's very easy to understand where the ill-being comes from if you use the Eightfold Path. For example, um, when we are on the path of well-being, the Buddha suggests that we practice right view and right speech. So that's the path of well-being, right view and right speech. So what's opposite to that? Wrong view and wrong speech. And that would lead us to the path of ill-being. So wrong view and wrong speech on one end, and right view and right speech on the other end. So we can see that looking deeply into one noble truth or one of the Four Noble Truths, we can see and realize the other noble truths in a stronger way. And they enhance each other. This is what we call in the Buddha's teachings the nature of interbeing. In this, on the path leading to well-being, once we have understood that there is ill-being, then we look into that ill-being to find the reasons why it has led us to that ill-being. And we do the opposite of that ill-being to get us on the path of well-being, which is the fourth noble truth, the path. And it's hopeful. It's very hopeful, as I say again, because like the like I was saying earlier about the right and the left, the night and the day, the light and the dark. Um, if there's darkness, there must be light. If there's right, there must be left. So if there's a way in, there must be a way out. And that's the hope in the Four Noble Truths. We feel very hopeful when we see the Four Noble Truths in that light. Um, this is the the path. The fourth noble truth is called the noble path. Um, instead of the the cause, which is the ignoble path. The fourth one is called the noble path because every step that we take on this path help us to generate well-being. Every step takes us towards our goal of every step takes us closer, or not even takes us closer to our goal of happiness. Sometimes having a goal of happiness can be an obstruction to having happiness as well. So we will be able to touch happiness in every single moment when we embark on this path. And the Buddha referred to this path as the Eightfold Path. And other than the Eightfold Path, there's also the 37 Factors of Awakening. So there's a lot of stuff, but just to kind of stay on track and keep everything nice and condensed, I'll just share a little bit today about the Four Noble Path, as the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and the practice of transforming suffering and cultivating happiness. So when we walk on the path of well-being, also known as the noble path, uh, we can generate well-being in each and every moment. The path itself, the path of well-being, is also a kind of routine because we may have consumed in such a way through our body and through our mind that has brought us, that has led us to that ill-being. Uh, And if we have the right kinds of nutriments, then we have well-being. But if we have the wrong kinds of nutriments, we will have ill-being. The Buddha said that in the Buddha said that nothing can survive without food. And food here is, of course, food that we eat, and also food that we eat through our senses. Volition is a kind of food. When we want to uh, for example, we work very hard when we just come out of um, school to save for our first car, for example. Thinking of our first car and wanting to save up for it is a kind of volition for us to go to work. So we thrive on that volition. We also thrive on physical, we also thrive on edible food because we eat in order to survive. And we also operate and we are fed through our sense impressions. Every day, we come into contact with the world around us, with our eyes, our ears, our nose, our our tongue, our body, and our mind. In Buddhism, we call these the six senses. And the six senses have six sense objects. The eye sees form, the ears hear sound, the tongue speaks, the tongue comes into touch with taste, uh, the body comes into physical contact. So through these doors, we also consume things. We consume sights, we consume sounds, we consume food, edible food. Um, we also consume touch in a way. For example, when somebody comes to us when we are going through a difficult time and they give us a hug. And we receive a lot of love and a lot of energy through that hug, transmit through touch. So we also thrive on this kind of sensory impression food. And we also thrive on our consciousness. There is two kinds of consciousnesses. There's the individual consciousness and there's the collective consciousness. And they kind of coexist and inter-embrace each other. Just like how in we ourselves, um, the cells in our body, the way that our anatomy works, we're kind of like our own little, guess, ecosystem. And around us, there's another ecosystem. So there's an individual one and a collective one. And these two kinds of um, spheres of consciousness uh, can be very, very important to our well-being. Because let's say we are born into um, we were born into a family where our parents fight each other a lot. There's a lot of difficulties in the family. And we always hear fighting. We always hear our parents talk each other down. Maybe we go through seeing our parents divorce each other, or we live in an environment where there are some children in the world who live in an environment where they're not able to go to school, not able to receive the right education. So the small consciousness is not being nourished by the bigger consciousness. And the collective consciousness is not going towards a wholesome direction. And that feeds the individual consciousness of the child. So I'd say that I'm very lucky because being in an environment like a monastery, I always have to practice because the collective consciousness of the monastery um, directs me, pardon me, directs me to a direction of practice, of studying the Buddhist teachings. In the morning, if I don't want to, even if I don't want to wake up and recite the sutras because I'm really, really tired, I have to do it because my community is doing it. And that's why the collective consciousness is very important in transforming and embracing the individual consciousness as well. So back on track to how the noble path, the path of well-being, thrives on um, on what we consume, the nutriments that we consume through our edible foods, sensory impressions, volition, and consciousness. They lead us into a certain direction, and to walk, to live a certain way, we need to feed ourselves with wholesome foods that can help us to retain health, to improve our health. Um, we eat to nourish our compassion. For example, I eat vegetarian food in order to nourish my compassion. So uh, it's almost it's almost being able to cover all four things in one shot. When I eat vegetarian food, uh, the sense impressions that come to me, um, um, that I get when, let's say, I'm served uh, a wonderful bowl of vegetarian noodle soup. I'm enjoying that soup and being very appreciative of the food that was put in front of me, taking in its scent, taking in its flavor, but that soup is suffering free. No animal had to suffer for that soup. And my volition for eating that food is because I don't want any other being in this world to have to suffer, any sentient being in the world to suffer. And I eat like that because the collective consciousness supports me to eat like that. It's very difficult for us to be vegetarian, to be vegan, to abstain from harming animals if we, let's say, we live near a fish market or our family. There's not many people in our family who are vegetarians. Even when we go to a dinner with our friends and we're the only vegan or vegetarian in the group. We're kind of like the oddball, and we always have to get something. Uh, Sometimes vegetarian restaurants, sorry, sometimes restaurants don't even have that as many vegan and vegetarian options. So putting ourselves in the right kind of environment with the right kind of consciousness helps us to grow. Our depression is a really a something that I think at least friends my age um, and young friends in our time we are working with. And I think we can look at depression through the same eyes with the Four Noble Truths. Nothing can survive without food. So if our depression is always there, that means that there's something that is feeding our depression. There's something that is continuing to feed that sadness, something that is continuing uh, to make that sadness grow. And what we have to do is we have to deprive it of food, and then naturally it will die out in a matter of months, if months or weeks. Sometimes we need to practice to later on. I'll speak a little bit about the art of cultivating happiness. Um, Through our sensory impressions, we take in, if, for example, I put myself in a really, really dark room for a whole day, I think I would feel a little bit down. But if I took myself outside on a beautiful day and I took a walk, I'm sure that that would uplift my mood. So that's feeding my sensory impressions, um, being able to cultivate happiness. So we deprive our depression of that kind of food that is feeding it suffering. Um, and instead, we give it the right kind of food. Uh, Instead of putting ourselves in an individual a space where mostly we're just um, stuck with our individual consciousness. And sometimes in the practice, we need a sangha. That's why we need a sangha, because practicing by ourselves, sometimes we cannot bear the weight of everything that is on our shoulders. The problems, the difficulties, the intense suffering that we might be going through in that moment. But with the collective consciousness, we can help, everyone can help to bear that suffering, to embrace us during that time. So in life, when we're struggling uh, through something very, very difficult, often we go to people who we trust. We go to people who we love, who we know um, we can talk to in order to ask them to be there for us, to listen to us, to help us to alleviate that suffering. So our suffering is fed by these kinds of nutriments, edible foods, sensory impressions, volition, and consciousness. Sometimes we think that our volition is also a wrong volition, and we we run and we run and we search and we try to grasp, we try to get, we try to obtain, but we tire ourselves through that journey, through that process of trying to seek something, um, that distant goal in the future that we think if we attain, we will become happy. And we often forget that happiness is closer than we think it is. Uh, our love is the same. Even the most beautiful love, uh, we think that we cannot do without that love. But if we don't know how to continue to feed that love, to feed that relationship, it will die out in a matter of a few months, a few years. If we don't learn the method and the practice to be able to feed our love, the art of loving, then our love could possibly turn into something else. And now a flower has turned into a piece of garbage. But again, the Four Noble Truths give us hope because even with garbage, we can make use of that garbage to be able to grow our next flowers. Um, I also just wanted to touch up a little bit on the five mindfulness trainings or the five precepts. These are five very universal trainings given by the Buddha in order to help us to be happy, to help us to be able to bring happiness to our family, and to build a society, a happy society. And the five mindfulness trainings are not religious at all. When we read them, we see that it's all about transforming suffering and finding the way to happiness. It's very, very wonderful. Um, when we read the five mindfulness trainings, not only can we see that it interconnects with the Four Noble Truths, but at the same time, we can see that when somebody asks us what the Dharma is, and we say the Dharma is the way of understanding and love, like what we recited earlier about um, taking refuge in the three jewels and how the Dharma, the teachings of the Buddha, is the path of understanding and love. The five mindfulness trainings is a concrete way to carry out that understanding through actions of love. There are two main components of the practice, and I would like to share about these two main components in connection with the five mindfulness trainings and tie it into the Four Noble Truths. So, the Four Noble Truths is about finding the cause of suffering, and then embarking on the path to lead to the end of suffering and being able to arrive at well-being. And the components of the practice help us to do that. Two components of the practice are, firstly, is transforming suffering. Secondly, is cultivating happiness. So, uh, how I'm going to tie this in to the five mindfulness trainings is I would like to read to you the first mindfulness training. So, you can get an idea of what the five mindfulness trainings are. The first mindfulness training uh, can be simply phrased as abstaining from harming life, from taking life. But a more detailed and a concrete way to practice the first mindfulness training will be read to you here, and I invite you to join me to listen to it. The first mindfulness training is reverence for life. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I'm committed to cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I'm determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in my world, in my thinking, or in my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from fear, anger, greed, and intolerance, which in turn come from dualistic and discriminative thinking. I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world. This is the first of the five mindfulness trainings. So, if we look deeply into this training, we can see that the noble truth of the ignoble path and the noble path is right there. It says that firstly, we are aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, right? Which means we covered the first noble truth. We accept that there is a lot of suffering brought about in this life because um, beings harm each other when life is taken away. And the path to the end of that suffering is cultivating the insight of interbeing and compassion in order to protect the lives of all beings, people, animals, plants, and minerals. Now we look at it again and we see that the concrete way to practice it is being determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in our thinking or in our way of life. And it continues to say that seeing harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, which come from dualistic and discriminative thinking, we will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, dogmatism in ourselves and in the world. So we see again the transforming part and the cultivating part. We transform greed, transform anger, transform fear, transform intolerance, and in turn, we cultivate openness. We cultivate non-discrimination. We cultivate non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, dogmatism in ourselves and in the world. And that's only the first of the five mindfulness trainings. So now we can also see that this is the Dharma of the Buddha, because the Buddha's Dharma is the way, the path of understanding and love. One time a friend asked me, Tai, I feel like I'm not a very compassionate person, or I would like to develop my compassion a little bit more. And then she asked me, how can I cultivate my compassion? And I took that as a subject for my meditation. And when I sat down and I contemplated on it for a while, uh, it just dawned on me that practicing the five mindfulness trainings in itself is practicing to develop our compassion. to show our love. We're showing our love to ourselves and to the world by practicing to keep that training. So the path of the Dharma is the path of understanding and love. That means we understand deeply the suffering in the world. We understand deeply that suffering comes from these five things: killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, and destroying our body with and our mind with intoxicants. We understand that in the world, there is a lot of suffering caused by these five things. That is why we show our love to ourselves by not killing, by not stealing, by not lying, by not engaging in sexual misconduct. We show our love to 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 families by by to we show our love to all beings. We show our love to our family. We show our love to the family of others by practicing the five mindfulness trainings. And we show love to society by practicing the five mindfulness trainings. So that is understanding and love. That is the teachings of the Buddha. So maybe I can send you a copy of the five mindfulness trainings, and that would be wonderful if you would like to read it and try to kind of see in that framework transformation and cultivation, and also to see it in the framework of the Four Noble Truths. Now, I will move on to uh, the to go. May I ask how much time I have left?
Yeah, most of Thai take half an hour.
Half an hour.
So I think
Okay.
maybe you can have another 15 minutes and then 15 minutes for Q&A, something like that. Or
Yeah.
maybe we can do another 5 minutes mindfulness meditation as well.
Yeah,
So
of
that's,
course.
yeah. Yeah, cảm ơn thầy.
Yeah. Thank you, Ko. Thank you, friends. So now I will continue a little bit on the the way to cultivate happiness. The two main components of the practice. Uh, when we say cultivate happiness, mm, it reminds me of cultivating a piece of land. It reminds me of growing crops. And sometimes the seeds, the potential is once planted in the soil is already there. The potential of the seed is already there. But what we have to do is we have to continue to water those seeds in order for those seeds to sprout. So our happiness is already there. But without mindfulness, it is very difficult for us to see that happiness. And we always run after a kind of happiness that is distant or a kind of happiness that is very fleeting. The Buddha doesn't say that we're not allowed to enjoy the moment that our Amazon packages arrive and enjoy the moment when we open our Amazon package and receive our new gift, which we have given to ourselves through our hard work, through um, through our hard-earned money. But the Buddha only says that we that happiness is only fleeting, and it becomes a problem when we only base our happiness off of that kind of fleeting happiness. And we need to find a happiness that is grounded, happiness that access, we can access all the time. And being being a student of the Buddha, a practitioner of the Dharma, I feel like happiness is already most of the time readily available to me. And all I need to do is just to be mindful in order to realize that happiness is there. Sometimes our ill-being, our suffering can be so overwhelming that we end up focusing on our suffering more than the happiness that is there. And we forget that happiness is still available around us. Uh, there's a discourse called given by the Buddha called the Discourse on the Eight Realizations of the Great Beings. Eight things that all great beings, enlightened ones, realize. And one of the realizations is they realize that the awareness, mm, they realize the awareness that the human mind is always searching outside itself and never feels fulfilled. And this brings about unwholesome activity. Um, Buddhas, bodhisattvas, enlightened beings, on the other hand, they know the value of having few desires. They live simply and peacefully so that they can devote themselves to practicing the way of understanding and love. And they regard the realization of perfect understanding to perfect understanding and their love as their only career. Uh, so, uh, like I was sharing earlier, that the human mind is always searching outside itself and it never feels fulfilled. And the same thing, even for me at present, and myself uh, mm, working on, I really love Buddha statues. I really love Buddha statues and I can't get enough of them. And sometimes when I have the chance to, I would use, sometimes we have personal donations, and I enjoy using my personal donations to bring back to the temple small statues of the Buddha. And in turn, when people are in need of a Buddha statue, then uh, they can rest assured that I have picked out very, very beautiful ones that I can offer to them as a gift, as a way uh, to encourage them on their practice. And I guess having the hobby or the liking to get Buddha statues is not a bad thing, but I shouldn't simply base my happiness just on buying Buddha statues. And the Buddha here is not to be found in the statue, but to be found in the way, to be found in the practice, to be found in carrying out his teachings in my way of life. So I need to look inside, but not outside to be able to find that Buddha. Just as with our happiness, sometimes we set um, we run after things. We run after goals that we think that will make us happy, and in the end, we forget about the journey. It's like we really, really want to get somewhere, and we have to drive 6 hours to get there. But we are so keen on getting there, and we're so focused on other things that we forget to enjoy the mountains as we drive by. We forget to enjoy what a beautiful day it is. We forget to enjoy that we have our loved ones sitting by our side. We forget to enjoy that we finally have the chance to get some peace and quiet in our mind, to be away from the city. So having few desires to to a particular goal of happiness can bring us a lot of happiness. And being able to draw the line can bring us happiness too. If we look back at our lives, we can see that we were very, very fortunate. Um, and maybe we don't need to search and to run as much as we think we do uh, to find happiness. Uh, People find happiness in the five central pleasures. In Buddhism, we say the five central pleasures are money, beauty, or uh, sensual sensual pleasures, um, fame. People run after fame. People always want to eat the best food. Um, People always want to. Those are the five main central desires: money, is that this beauty, or sex, uh, fame, food, overeating, and oversleeping. And these things all lead to problems. So understanding that the nature of these five things are also unsatisfactory, we're not attached to the five central pleasures. We live in a world where we have to eat, where we have to sleep. We will come to contact with money, but we live in such a way where we can draw the line so we don't exhaust ourselves running after something that is distant or being at a certain place and wanting only more. drinking salt water and hoping that salt water can quench our thirst. Happiness is always accessible, and if we practice mindfulness, we will see it. Sometimes, aside from being able to have few desires, which can lead us to happiness, there's something else that can lead us to happiness, which is releasing and letting go of our idea of happiness. Because sometimes we might have an idea of happiness, and that very idea of happiness prevents us from being happy. For example, we feel like we must have a job or that particular job, or we must have that house, we must have that position, we must have um, that object, and that idea of happiness drains us of all of our energy, and it takes away. It basically puts itself right in front of our face like this. So now my eyes are covered and I can't see anything else but this portable charger. And that's what happens sometimes when we have an idea of happiness and we can't let go of it. Sometimes we do create even more suffering by imposing that idea on others. For example, let's say a young man falls in love with a young woman, and he feels like if she does not like him back, if she doesn't reciprocate his feelings, or if he cannot marry her, he cannot be happy. There's no point in living if he can't marry the love of his life. And we step out from that. We, as people who are not in that situation, maybe some of us not in love currently, we realize that those of us who are not in love or not in that situation, we're fine. And we don't have to, uh, there's still many, many points in living for us. Uh, because there are other things that can bring us joy and happiness in life, not just that one single thing. But often when we have that idea, that set intention to be, sorry, not set intention, but that set idea, that goal of happiness, it stops us from actually being happy. And once we're able to let go of that goal of happiness, that idea of happiness that we might impose on ourselves and on other people, happiness starts coming in from all directions. Um, it comes in from above, from below, from across, from all around. The roof we have over our heads is happiness. The clothes we have over our body is happiness. Our tummy having food in it is happiness. Our loved one sitting next to us is happiness. And these are some things that we forget. And it's very, very accessible to us. Um, and sometimes in our deepest moments of suffering, it can be very difficult for us to find happiness. And that's okay. Because we need to look deeply into our suffering to find a way out, to be able um, to embark on the path of well-being. And the path of well-being itself is also a path of happiness. Um, happiness, the cultivation of happiness comes with the practice. And uh, we we have practices like sitting meditation, walking meditation. Um, some people who practice the Pure Land Buddhist tradition, they recite the Buddha's name. Some people who practice Vajrayana Buddhism, they recite mantras. There's so many different methods of practice for us to be able to cultivate mindfulness, concentration, insight, and joy. Especially for me, I like practicing walking meditation to cultivate happiness. There have been many, many times where something has happened and I felt quite down, and there was not enough time for me to sit down and to talk to someone about it in that moment. So what I did was I go outside and I just take a walk around the temple, practice walking meditation. And as I took each step, I practice to arrive in each moment, to surround myself in the present moment, to see the flowers blooming on the side of the road, to see the nice weather outside today, to hear the birds chirping. And I realized that, wow, the flower is always there for me. The birds are always there for me chirping. The sky is today is very, very beautiful. It's true. But I was just so stuck in my own suffering that I I couldn't find anything flavorful other than um, my uh, immersing myself in my suffering. So we don't do that to cover up our suffering, but we practice to cultivate happiness in order to have enough joy in ourselves to overcome suffering. Just like before, in a time where people didn't have central heating, they used wood to heat their homes. So that means in the dry season or in the seasons where uh, firewood was readily available, then they would have to go chop that wood and stock up on that wood for the winter. So sometimes we have to cultivate joy to be able to have enough joy to get through the dark days. We have to be able to store that wood for the winter. And storing wood for the winter is not only coming back to the present to recognize all of the wonderful conditions of happiness that are there, it is also walking on the path of well-being, practicing the Eightfold Path, walking on the path of understanding and love. That is cultivating wood for the long winter days. If we have the practice, there's no need to fear. If we have enough firewood and we are going into the winter, but we have enough firewood for us to last through the winter, there's no need for us to fear that we won't be able to get through the winter. So now, before I end, I would just like to offer you a mnemonic to remember the Eightfold Path. And you can write this down if you'd like to. It makes the Eightfold Path easy to remember. So you can remember the Eightfold Path as Visa, Le, Le, like Le, like in the it's a French inspired bridge, LE, and MC, which means master of ceremony. So visa is like your visa, you require a visa to enter a certain country, and Le is LE, MC is master of ceremony. So the word visa means that the Eightfold Path is the wisdom and ethics we need to enter the path. It's like entering another country. Le is just a bridge to bridge the word visa and MC together. But MC means master of ceremony, and this means mastering mindfulness and concentration, the two final aspects of the two final uh, spokes of the Eightfold Path. So hopefully I'll send this to you later. But visa is V means right view, I in visa is right intention, S in visa is right speech, A in visa is right action, and the le, the French inspired part, is livelihood and effort. And the last one is mindfulness and concentration, MC. So this is a way that we can remember the Noble Eightfold Path. Yeah. And that is it for today. And maybe I can uh, open up this a little bit more for some questions and as well as to end on a story. Um, there was a very famous poet in China. Um, his name was Su Po, and he was a lay disciple of a very famous Zen master, a Chan master named Nilka. And Nilka means bird's nest. They called him Zen master bird's nest, old bird's nest, because he spent most of his time living in a tree house, kind of like a tree house. He'd be living in the tree where the sparrows nest. And one day, Sudongpo decided to come visit his teacher. And uh, when he came to visit his teacher, he looked up into the tree to find his teacher. And his teacher looked down, and as they finished greeting each other, Sudongpo asked his teacher, Venerable Master, um, can you summarize for me what the Buddhist teachings are all about? Something along the lines of that. I wasn't there during that time, so I don't know what exactly he said, but something along those lines of that. Can you summarize to me the teachings of all Buddhas? How should I practice? And the venerable bird's nest, old bird's nest, he looked down and he said, to abstain from doing all unwholesome things, to cultivate good things. So firstly is to abstain from evil. Second is cultivate the good. And thirdly, to keep our body, to keep our mind pure. That is the teachings of all Buddhas. And Sudongpo looked up at his teacher and he scoffed and he said, even a 4-year-old can say what you just said to me. So he was kind of scoffing off what his teacher taught him. But his teacher said, yes, a 4-year-old can repeat what I said, but there's no guarantee that an 80-year-old man through his whole life has been able to carry out simply those 3 things. And if we were to summarize the teachings of the Buddha, I think we can summarize it in 3 points. To abstain from doing evil, to cultivate all good, and to keep our body and mind pure, peaceful, calm, and happy. Abstaining from doing all evil is transforming the roots of suffering. Cultivating all good is walking on the path of transformation, embarking on the path of well-being. So this is how it ties in the whole picture. Remember, as students of the Buddha, or even if we are not students of the Buddha, we somehow can carry out the Buddha's teachings or have a little bit of the essence of the Dharma inside of us by carrying out those 3 very simple things. And it's enough for us to practice for our whole lives. So thank you so much once again for your listening and for your kindness. And I'm very, very happy to have had the chance to share with you some of the Buddha's teachings today. And I wish you all a happy time, happy moment wherever you are. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the teaching today. Before we end, anyone has any question before I move on with the next step, like some announcement and also the dedication of merit? Please, if any question, please let us know. Okay, so let me see. So, do we have any question, or should I move on with the dedication of merit?
I have one question.
Yes, please go ahead.
So I was wondering, like, what's the most important thing about Buddhism? Like, I know you went over the stuff, but I want to know, like, what do you think specifically is like the most important that someone should take away from this?
Thank you, Kiana. I think the most important thing that we can take away from this is that with the Four Noble Truths and seeing life through the context of the Four Noble Truths, Buddhism offers us a lot of hope to be able to transform our suffering and to live happily. In Buddhism, we always speak of nirvana, the end goal, the cessation of all suffering, the extinction of all defilements, afflictions of the mind. But on that path, on that journey, happiness and well-being are just as equally as important, and it will take us to the goal of nirvana. But the most important thing is being able to see that there's a lot of hope, even though there's suffering. Whenever you have suffering or any difficulty in your life, remember that there's always hope through the Four Noble Truths. There's always a way out, as there was a way in. And Buddhism can offer much, much more than what I'm just saying today. And the things that I said today are kind of like a mumbo jumbo of everything important that I tried to put together. So if one thing that is important that I think that we could grab out of it is that the Buddha only spoke and taught in relation to one thing, one major thing, and that is suffering and the end of suffering. And I'm sure that everybody wants the end of suffering. And there is suffering in life, but there's hope that that suffering can be transformed. Happiness is attainable. Happiness is we can touch happiness, and the most important thing is to, I guess, to live our lives in the spirit of the two components of the practice, to transform our suffering at its very roots by abstaining to do evil, and to cultivate the good by by practicing the 5 mindfulness trainings and the Eightfold Path. So I think that's the most important things. And I tried to put together the most basic things. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Thầy, so much. And Kiana, I think one of the things that we tried is the online session we have monthly. It's a short, and so the master and teachers trying to put together all the information. But I think that a lot of more study or things like that, we can also get more classes, or also more readings, or more books and things like that, or go to the center nearby. That is one of the point as well. So do more reading. Anyone else have any more questions? Okay, so just like part of the practice, let me share my screen real quick. A second. Yeah, so thank you, Thầy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We just some announcement that this is a Buddhism journey, and our goal is just to bring in this forum, we try to bring on the master and teacher from various traditions. Like we have the monks from various traditions, various cultures joins us on this online platform, because we believe that each of us some teacher may suitable for some teacher may suitable for others. So that is the point of this journey. And all these are recorded and also in our YouTube channel, Buddhism Journey. And if you'd like to listen to previous teaching, please do. And so this is, and I will send that in our emails as well. Our next session is in March 23rd, and that is with Venerable Thich Thich is one of the original master that teach on this journey. And another one, we have the Georgia Buddhist camp is coming up in April 10 to 13. That is the next that's in-person camp at like an hour away from Atlanta. And with that short announcement, I believe that when we practice, even though online together and with the master, we accumulate some merits, and it's a part of the Buddhist. When we have some merits, we would like to share that to everyone. So with that, to conclude our online platform today, I would like to sincerely thank Thầy and Thầy and Master Thầy from Thich as well for having your compassion and kindness and come to this platform with us today. I really appreciate, and thank you all for being with us. So now, if you all would like, you can put your palms together and we do the dedication of merit. And then we can send this merit to everyone else as well. Um, may every living being, our minds is one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Okay. Thank you, Thầy. Thank you, everyone.
Say something before we all leave.
Yes, Thầy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, sister, and thank you, brothers and sisters. Before we leave, I would also like to introduce you to this book. So if you have the chance and you would like to read more on the Buddhist teachings, this is a very good book. It's called The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching. The Heart of the Buddhist Teaching. And it is written by Zen Master Thich, and it has all of the most uh, the essential and heart teachings of the Buddha in this book. And one other book that I also wanted to suggest is there's a series called The Teachings of the Buddha, I believe, by Wisdom Publications. And uh, this particular book is about the Four Noble Truths. So if you want to learn more about the Four Noble Truths, you can also find it in the Heart of the Buddhist Teachings or in this book here. It's called Noble Truths, Noble Path, and it's written by Bhikkhu Bodhi, Bhante Bodhi, who is also a very, very respected teacher. And my teacher himself also has some books as well. So maybe I can send the link to you so then you can refer to his books if you'd like to learn more. And I myself, as a student of my teacher, I really appreciate the way that he delivers the teachings very, very simply and very appetizing. So I hope that we
Yes.
can, yeah, I'll send you the links to these three books
Yes.
as well as I will send you the link to the 5 mindfulness trainings as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Thầy, so much, Thầy. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Thầy. See everyone next month. Con cảm ơn Thầy rất nhiều. Để con stop recording.